Welcome to another episode of Season 5 here at the My Identity Podcast. We're so glad you tuned in just to get your favorite beverage, popcorn, curl up in your fuzzy slippers because you're about to go on a ride and you're about to learn a new word today and your whole life is about to be instantaneously transformed. So you did the right thing by tuning in today. Welcome to the My Identity Podcast.
Welcome to the My Identity Podcast, where we like to say my DNA is different. Here are the conversations and stories from people learning how to engage life from an all things new reality. That your purpose and that your identity isn't determined by what you do. This is the My Identity Podcast with Duran Mahan.
Hey, happy day, whatever day you're watching this episode. I'm thrilled to welcome two of my friends and fellow community dwellers and journeyers, nomads, all the good things. I've got two friends of mine with me today, and we're going to talk all things business, and we're going to teach you a new word, but I'm going to let them pronounce it because they say it a lot more concisely than I do. I want you to welcome Aaron Sanders and Jeremy Weedman today. This is Aaron. That's Jeremy.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for having us here, man. It's awesome.
It's good to have you guys. I've known you for coming up on 3 years. I've met y'all.
Yeah.
So that's been 3 years of, it's been a benefit in so many ways for my family.
What a
and me.
blessing for you.
Yeah, it is. It is a blessing. I've discerned between blessing and curse or just annoyance. It's been a blessing on both counts. Of course, Aaron and I have a little bit of a background together. Not together, but he was in Minnesota. I was here, but we have similar DNA
We have a
strands.
similar Christian background DNA structure of a group.
So. A lot of interesting, colorful stories.
Yeah. Some amazingly good and some interesting.
Yeah.
So it's just been that
Very
way.
interesting. Yeah, I always say we could. Some of the stories from our past escapades of all things religion. You couldn't make those up. Because some of them are pretty bizarre.
Yeah.
Being a preacher's kid, it even takes it to a different level.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I remember laying on the carpet in churches and revival services underneath these long wooden pews, and I was a little boy looking up, and there being like dried gum up under. And,
totally.
Contrary to popular opinion, a lot of that still had flavor in it.
Yeah,
it did. Man. Yeah, it was.
Especially when you put them all together.
It is, man. Just a kaleidoscope of wonderful flavors.
There's a little
and
bit
textures.
of sugar left in there somewhere.
Just a tad,
People's lives are changing.
Man, and you're just chewing the cud. That's one. You ever heard that expression, chewing the cud? Yeah, we won't get into any bovine science and what that actually means, but
I would say that a lot of my foundation came out of that time. There was a lot of crazy stuff. When you ever get a bunch of people together, some of this stuff gets crazy.
Oh yeah.
But my love for the Bible, my dedication to memorizing it and applying it, was life-changing.
Yeah.
The reality is, I felt like maybe 8-10 years ago, God said to me, "You've read it, you've memorized it. Now it's time to live it."
Yeah.
And that doesn't negate that I stop reading it every morning.
Yeah.
But I started looking for ways to work it into my life. Right?
Yeah.
Instead of having a great thing that teaches on a Sunday, what about something that lives on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday? And that led us to write the crazy story that is our background, which is a whole nother.
Oh, that's a mini series, man. I think it's I think it would be a great reality TV show. Reenactment.
Don't tell my wife that. She would
She'll be sketching out the storyboard as we speak.
Right, yeah.
Well, what you mentioned about living that out Monday through Saturday, it's a really good segue into kind of what we're going to talk about today, man.
We've done this a few times.
Yeah, once or twice. Brandon, it's all him, man. He coaches me on all this kind of stuff. I'm just, Uncle Tom coming in from the field saying, "Hey, man, let's do a podcast," and Brandon kind of aligns everything. But I can remember 21 years ago sitting here in Franklin, north in Franklin, and going through the major crisis of belief in my life. At the time, it was just Tina and Ryan and me. It's before Zoe came along. And I had just been burnt out on church, and I was coming to Nashville to just become the next rock star in the music industry. And so I was here, and I was like, "God, I'm your man of faith and power. You just don't know what's about to happen. You finally have given me an opportunity." The company was a technology marketing company that I worked for. My business card said director of marketing, but I never marketed the first product. So This was a guy at my dad's
So
church.
you weren't good at your job.
I wasn't good at my job, but he gave me an office, everything, a desk. I mean, cedar, great desk. But it was a guy. He had great personality. He was a smooth talker. He'd been in all kind of business ventures.
Yeah.
Even had some. I think he had some prison marketing that he was involved in. But he was trying, and so he started this company, and he hired me. And so I would sit in and just come up with ideas, and he loved them, and then he would bring in other people and bring in investors, and I'm like, man, this guy's really connected. This is going to go somewhere. Then he came in one day and he's like, I know that your heart is music, he said, and so I've talked with the CFO, and we want to send you and your family to Nashville. We're going to keep you on payroll. We're going to just pay you to do.
Wow.
He said if we have projects that come along, he said we're going to pay you. And we want you to follow your dream.
Whoa,
so at that
amazing.
moment, I'm like, this is it. God, you've got me.
Yeah.
This is what I want. This is what I was created for. My seasoned 25 years, I was 25, 28 years old at the time. So we move up here, and from about August to December, I was going out singing, doing some conferences, different things, and it was just going great. And so I was just telling Tina, baby, go ahead and pick out a place where you want to have a beach house, and what kind of car, And so in December, coming out of Christmas, every door, God, they didn't close, they resoundingly and emphatically slammed shut and sealed. And it was like at that point, God picked me up and said, okay, now I'm going to show you the real reason you're here in Nashville. And I hit the bottom, man. Nobody knew where I was. I couldn't, no opportunities. I mean, literally, it was like I was a leper and was sent to some remote location.
That's pretty graphic.
I was like peeling scabs and stuff to it. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, I remember the day I just, in my mind, I'm just like, me and God, I was probably out on our back little patio, and I said, today I believe that there is a God, and I think he loves me most days. But other than that, I don't know anything else. I don't know what's true. And at that point, it was almost like God says, now.
Yeah, right?
Now I've got you. And so now we're going to, that was like, it was deconstruction a good way. I needed a lot of that in my life to detox. But like you said, so many of those foundational truths that were put in me, even coming up, that was the fiber that went into kind of steadying me. And then God began to put all the pieces back in place, and most of what I was learning was about unlearning so much of the things that had gotten ingrained in me. And so my whole crisis of belief started, and I was there for a few more months in Nashville. And so the one thing that kept jumping out at me is this whole, this is me on Sunday, and then I live like the rest of the world for the rest of the week. That doesn't make sense, God. Right. And around that same time, the movie The Matrix came out with Keanu Reeves.
Oh, this
and
is
I watched
this
that.
was a while ago.
It was, man. Yeah, it was back, right after the Earth cooled and the dinosaurs had just left.
1770.
It was, yes. Heard a lot of bugles at the time, freedom bugles and stuff. So I'm sitting there and I'm just like watching that movie, and it's like breaking me down. And the whole concept about somewhere in there, I don't know if it's Neo or whatever, says there's a wall, but if I push on it and it moves, it's not a wall.
Yeah.
And so that I realized so much of what I had been taught and told was real, was really, God was saying, no, I'm going to take you back, and there's some wiring that's got to really be fixed in you, and you need to get a better understanding of who I am and how I see you. And so my whole concept of church kind of changed from this. Church going from something that I did one day a week, maybe 2 days a week, to who I was. And that included me as my career, my business, my health, my relationships, everything. It's not like this is the real life Duran and then this is me on church days. And so God began to undo and then redo me in that way. And so now we fast forward to 2023 or 2020, and we come to the Hope You See and start hearing this concept that we're going to discuss today, AVODA, and worship and service. Is that the three?
Nailed it.
That's the word of the day. Did I say it right?
You nailed it.
Not like some country bumpkin, a
Well,
voter.
Some people might argue you said it wrong, but not
I
me.
did. Okay.
Well, somebody came to me over the weekend and said they were so glad that I created this avocado round table, and it's definitely not avocado. So you didn't hit that wrong.
Yeah, I didn't add a
avoda.
C.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's right.
The logo would have been easier.
That would
Yes.
a lot easier, man. Just put it on
Avocado.
the seed.
Yeah.
But this whole concept of the kingdom of God and expressing in this earth, and going from this thing where this is the secular us. You know, you can't tell us from the rest of the world. Mindsets, how we respond, our priorities, how we spend our time. And then on Sundays, all of a sudden, I go into this transformation chamber and just become this, you know, angelic being, you know, and talk about Jesus and smile at all the people in the parking lot. And that just bothered me. And I was like, no, we're supposed to be a lot more transformed individually in every facet of life that we're engaged in.
Absolutely.
And reflect just like Jesus did, man. If his Spirit's living in us, then why aren't we having the effect in our businesses, in our health, in our relationships? Why aren't we seeing the effects that Jesus saw?
Right.
And so hearing that for the first time, and I even met with you one time in the house there at Homestead, and just hearing this concept, I was like, man, where was this 20 years ago when I was sitting outside on my patio? I had I just felt like, you know, a leaf blowing in the wind, and the only thing I knew was that there was a God.
Yeah.
But then seeing this and how the kingdom was so much more than this, what I'd been taught it was, you know, or been around. And so hearing this, so I want you guys just to jump in today and kind of explain just the whole concept. I didn't give you something specific here, right? Of AVODA and just how that looks. And I want everybody to hear the story of this, because it's going to change them.
Well, I want to be clear. We can articulate this now better than we could. We all felt this rumbling in us 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But now it feels like there's language for it. And some of that starts, at Hope Unlimited Church Nashville, where we all go to church, we often talk about the Bunny Barn days. But this, for Jeremy and I, predates the Bunny Barn. It was in the HBL house. The Here Be Lions group had a house that they were renting. And that was the first sit down that I had with you, Jeremy, about kingdom and business and what church is and what it needs to look differently. Yeah. And you make me speak to how that birthed, because a lot of the language I have came from some of those early conversations with you.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So, okay, here we go. So I will do my best. Thanks for having us. I'll just say that,
dude,
man.
I've been looking forward to this.
I know that when I met Aaron, we were sort of kindred. I look at him as a mentor more than a friend, but we are friends in the fact that he's lived this life out. And so he's really the first guy that I ran into that had a passion for this. This is let me start with saying this is a mission on my life. Business and kingdom is a mission on my life, and for Aaron too.
Yeah.
I didn't know that until about 3-4 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. So what I would say is, to that idea of language precedes culture shifts.
That's good.
Yeah.
Culture can't shift until language changes. And I heard a guy say that, his name is Clint Kaler, you're in Kansas City, my man. He said, language precedes culture and societal shifts. That's why in the 70s they started talking different, and a whole new culture came in. High schoolers and kids today, they're saying words that you're like, what did you just say? Right?
Foreign language, yeah.
Right, it's a foreign language. But whether we know it or not, that's actually language that's changing culture.
That's true.
And they're forming their own culture based on a language that's changed.
Yeah.
And so God says this in the Bible. He says, I will do nothing before I first tell my prophets.
Yeah.
So he's bound himself to talk before he acts. So the fact that we're getting new language around Kingdom Marketplace and business and stuff is exciting, because it means an action's coming.
Yeah.
An event is coming. And I believe prophetically, God is giving us new language in a prophetic way to usher in a new societal change. So that started for me. My story, I'll go really quickly, but my story is I started in business, right? Started a company in a basement with my buddy, right? And
Apple?
we built, yeah, right. Just a little thing, yeah. Steve and all that, you know.
Yeah, Steve.
Wozniak was there. He was kind of, no, I'm kidding.
Such a trip.
Yeah, it was the American dream, right? It was starting a web development company in a basement, and we didn't know what we were doing. And long story short, I was traveling with Dustin, Here Be Lions, towards the back half of that, and was missing a lot of work and sort of balancing this ministry work stuff. And it got to a point with that secular sacred wall you're talking about, that thing that's there, but it's not really, but it is, totally is.
Yeah.
That was real in my life all through my 20s and early 30s. And so what happened was I lost the business. I lost it. All the ownership, the business is still going, but the ownership that I had lost because of that divide in me.
Wow.
And so so when that happened, I went full ministry. I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to do websites for this Here Be Lions stuff and some other stuff we had going on, and I'll just do the tech side, but I'm going to sit at a desk behind a ministry, right?
Yeah.
And what I found was after about a year, I started dreaming about business. But when I was doing when I was doing business, I was dreaming about ministry.
Okay.
Right? And David Balestri says this perfectly as well. It's like, you're in the high rise in the corner office in business, dreaming about being a pastor. I think God's calling me to pastor, right?
Yeah.
And so people leave the high rise to go pastor, and then they pastor, and they're 3 years into that, they're like, man, I'd really love to be in the high rise.
Miss that corner office.
Right.
Yeah.
And could it be that a lot of that divide, a lot of that struggles is within us? That God says, whatever you do, do it unto the Lord. Right? And that is AVODA, right?
Yeah.
And he's going to talk about that. But so the language started changing for me about a year in after that, working just for Dustin. And I felt God say to me, gosh, this is crazy, but I really felt the Lord prophetically said to me, I'm raising up market makers. And that changed my life because I started to dive into that. And I went to this conference that this church called Hope UC Unlimited, Hope Unlimited Church in LA.
Wow.
Put on this conference, and they brought this guy named David Balestri in.
Were you in Kansas City at this time?
No, we were.
Oh, you were here now. Okay,
yeah, we were here.
All right.
So I went to LA, sat in that conference, and I listened to Mark Check and David present for basically an hour on business and kingdom. And I was maybe 32, 33, one of the younger guys in there. I'm in the back with a notebook, and I bawled the whole time because I was like, my mission was coming alive.
Was resonating strongly in you, man.
I was like,
yeah.
So we say, where were you 20 years ago? They were there. My heart wasn't ready for it. My mind wasn't ready for it. This message has been in the earth.
Yeah.
But the language is changing now, and it's growing. We were talking, it's growing. This message is starting to grow. Why? Because a culture shift is coming. So that was kind of the beginning of the end for me, as far as, not the end, but that was the beginning of the beginning.
Right.
Listening to David and Mark talk about this, I went to Dustin about 6 months later, and I said, I think God's calling me to business again. He said, well, what does that look like? But now that wall was gone. So that was a whole different conversation.
Okay.
Not like, hey, I want to quit and I want to go do, it was like, what does that look like? And luckily, we have a pastor, Pastor Dustin, I call him. He's my friend, my good friend. I've known him for a lot of years.
Awesome guy, man.
He's not scared of it.
No.
He's a pastor, but he sees and he supports marketplace and business people.
Yeah.
And sometimes those two worlds fight for a lot of stupid reasons.
Yeah.
And we've all seen it. I grew up in the church. We've been around.
Yeah.
So there are things that have to be worked out. But the first thing that has to be worked out is you have to have pastors that are secure enough to not be threatened by business people around them.
Exactly.
And he's that guy. And you got to have business people that have a ministry mindset too. So that was the start of it for me, when I'm kind of like getting language and reading books and praying and God speaking, and this is like coming alive. And then I meet Aaron, right? And then the church starts to grow, and then business people start coming in, and you hear them talk. And then this AVODA word pops on the map, right? And God is absolutely building something here and nationwide and worldwide, but it's growing here, and he's bringing people to it. So that's kind of the setup for me. So AVODA.
Yeah, and then my background obviously is business. So I was that guy in the high rise who also kind of kept one foot in the church ministry world, and they would always tell me, you're a pastor, you're just fighting it. You just need to be a pastor, and you're fighting it. And, it was kind of heaping guilt on me that, well, maybe I should just quit everything and be this pastor. But the high-rise job that I afforded me the luxury of working with a church without ever needing pay. I've more than took care of myself, my family, and then I could satisfy that itch for ministry.
Yeah.
But they were two definitely different worlds. And for me, to start bringing those two together, I started unpacking. You talked about the deconstruction. Yeah. And I think that their deconstructionist has a negative connotation.
It does, yeah.
The enemy always does this, so you need to understand that he takes something that is really good and pushes it to an extreme and causes people to run away from it.
Total counterfeit, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that this isn't tiptoeing through the tulips here, but we need to deconstruct some of our understanding of what we have previously accredited to God.
Yeah. He's got blamed for a lot.
He
hasn't
has gotten blamed for a lot.
That's
and
crazy.
and some of that sacred, I love how Jeremy said it. One is like, you have to change your format here and have them actual mics, because if you're going to have Jeremy on here,
I need a cord where he
mic
can
drops.
Yeah.
Like he does those.
Brandon, get me on a mobile, man,
Yeah.
doing 360.
No,
Drone. Maybe we could catch you with drone footage.
Yeah.
Low-flying drones in here, obviously.
Yeah,
but
that'll be a sound.
Well, and
nightmare.
Pastor Dustin is one of those too. That
Yeah.
mic drop thing. The concept that we're going to talk about, the AVODA, is a Hebrew word, and it came from a sermon that Dustin preached at Hope Unlimited Church when we were in the barn, Bunny Barn. It was just a kind of passing sermon, but it burned into me like it gave me language. Now, when I was deconstructing my church world, I started looking at what I call kingdom Bernoulli principles, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'll define that for your listener a little bit. And Bernoulli's principle is the principle of air passing over a fixed wing creates lift.
Yeah.
Right? So that's how an airplane flies. Now, we are tasked with the Lord's Prayer, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So we have to figure out, how does your world come to earth?
Yeah, right.
And so if we look at a flat piece of paper, we're going to toss it across the table. It's just going to land on the table, not go anywhere.
Right.
But if I fold that to observe Bernoulli's principle, fold it into a paper airplane, now I can get in some serious trouble in class, because it's going to go all the way across the room. Now, if I were setting that flat piece of paper and we were 160 feet or 160 miles straight up, low Earth orbit, there's not much gravity.
Right.
That paper, I don't have to fold it to make it work. I can just toss it across the room.
Yeah.
So that's the heavenly realm. It operates as God wants it to in heaven.
Right.
But now heaven on earth is going to require us to take some Bernoulli principles,
Yeah,
fold
yeah.
that into something, and make it work. Well, what are those Bernoulli principles? They are when I said God started talking to me about live those Bible verses that you know so well.
Yeah.
Now that's those kingdom Bernoulli principles. So one of them is seek first the kingdom, and everything else will be taken care of. So then we have to ask the question, that should be the most important scripture.
That's the capstone, man. Yeah.
Every Christian, we've all heard it,
Yeah.
but if you really believe the Bible, that's something you should take really seriously.
No doubt.
Seek first the kingdom, and everything else that you will be taken care of. Well, then it's like we're so ignorant. He had to go on and say, no, I'm telling you,
Seriously,
like
guys.
practical things here, like consider the birds. I
yeah.
take care of them, and they don't. So, as believers, we should be trying to figure out what it is to seek first the kingdom.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now let's trace that back.
In everything.
Yes,
Yeah,
in every
everything.
aspect of it. So let's just
Holistic.
look at it from Jesus' example. The death, burial, and resurrection was to solve a relational disconnect that happened in the garden between Adam and his creator.
Yeah.
Right? That death, burial, and resurrection was the restoration of being able to walk again with God in the garden. Right?
Yeah.
That's what New Testament believers get to walk in.
Yeah.
That's what we have, the abiding presence of God to go
Yeah.
with us on every level. So at its basis, the kingdom is about relationship.
Yeah.
So now that we're jumping over into the business world, what is the business world? At its basis, it is about relationship with a
Relationships.
customer.
Yes.
You're going to meet their needs. You're going to solve their problem.
Right.
And they're gladly going to surrender money to you. That's a kingdom Bernoulli principle. It works whether you're Hindu, Muslim, or Christian. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It's
Right.
just dropped into the earth because God is so good. He wants everybody to benefit. Whether it's salvation long term, that's his goal.
Sure.
But he's willing to give his gifts without repentance to his people. So when I started seeing some of that stuff, this was Hope Unlimited Church hadn't really started yet. I was deconstructing my who God is and all
Yeah.
that stuff
Oh,
that
yeah.
you said. Actually, I was sitting in a church service, a random church in Franklin, Tennessee, and they said anybody who doesn't know about God or have a relationship with God, raise your hand. Well, this third generation pastor who's deconstructing everything,
Your
I raised
hand
my
went up?
hand. I'm like, I don't know
It's
anything.
an honest moment, man. Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought I did, but maybe not.
Yeah, and so that deconstruction had led me to a decision, if you will,
Yeah.
that was, hey, the business is where it's at. These people in business are actually operating the kingdom better than the people on Sunday morning. They are meeting a need.
Yeah.
That at the very base level, they are meeting a need, and they're doing it in a way like we would do discipleship at church when I grew up, and you'd have a discipleship group meet on a Saturday morning at 6:30 or 7 or 10, and it had free coffee and donuts, and 6 people would show up, and 3 of them were supporting the guy that's actually teaching it, or the lady that's teaching it, because it's not effective.
Right.
But then in the business world, that discipleship thing is called coaching, and people spend $10,000 to go to that, and it changes their life.
Right.
Now I'm starting to see that, so there's shade in my brain. I'm starting to throw shade on the church world.
Sure.
I'm deconstructing my faith, right?
Yeah.
And then enters this amazing guy, Dustin Smith. And I say amazing guy because at the time they were going to start this Hope Unlimited Church Nashville, and I met with him and said, "Hey, great, you do that."
There's not a lot of churches around here.
Yeah, we need more churches.
Rarity.
And so in my brain, I've already got some shade thrown towards that movement.
Yeah.
But I met with him and said, I bless you, I support you, go do this thing, but I'm out. Like, I'm going to do some stuff over here. And I'll never forget this happened, and a business leader actually spoke this into me. This business leader was attending Hope Unlimited Church at the time. And it was a Sunday morning. I was on my way to Manhattan. I was going to spend a week in Manhattan in a tour business that I was part of. And I'm on my way driving through Pennsylvania. And if you know my background, my story is God told us to just trust him, and we lived in a van down by the river.
So this is where Chris Farley got his inspiration. Was actually your story.
It was our story. It's crazy. So I'm having this conversation with God driving across Pennsylvania. And I said, look, I've lived in a van for you, God. I'll do anything. If you want me to persevere, and I use that word because I'm King James Bible guy,
sure, man.
right? And so yes, all that stuff, that's how I was raised. So I'm like, God, I will persevere in anything that is you. But this church thing would be persevering for me because I don't want to do it. I know how it ends. I know how it progresses. I've been there. I've kind of kicked
the end
curb.
game, man. Yeah.
And right at that moment, I got a text, and I didn't look at it because I was driving. I have a good driver.
Right on.
Hands-free Tennessee.
We'll give that. Tell my wife that I did that. Because I get in trouble for that. But I got this text, and so the next time I had an opportunity to stop, I looked at the text, and it was from the business guy that I trust probably the most to just be very logical and detailed, not a true Christian, throw the platitudes of Christianity out. But I got a text from him that said, hey, I just stood up this morning at Hope Unlimited Church, and when I stood up, I heard God say, tell Aaron to persevere.
Whoa.
And so then I got that text.
Come on.
And I'm like,
oh,
okay.
Man.
I've got to pivot a little bit.
Yeah.
And so
that'll get your attention.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I pulled. It was kind of that. It was like, now I got to persevere again. This is not living in the van, but it's up there.
Right.
With what I had perception. So I pivoted that business model and started managing the services, the industry from at-home position, which allowed me to become a regular attender at Hope. And that's where Dustin, just in a passing, did this sermon that talked about AVODA. And he talked about in Genesis, God says to Adam, you're to tend the garden. Well, that word tend is AVODA. And then Abraham, when he says the boy and I are going to go to the mountain to worship. Now, in my background, all the worship leaders always said the first time God ever mentioned worship was right here. And it's a sacrifice. And I heard that. But that word was AVODA as well.
Same word.
Yeah. And then Joshua, which we all have on plastered on our good Christian walls, says, choose you this day who you're going to serve. As for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. That word serve was AVODA.
Okay.
Something clicked in my spirit that said that Aaron that was at home in the boardroom on the 7th floor downtown St. Paul, Minnesota, and was also at home pastoring people in a church setting. Those two came together for me. And I realized work, worship, and service can occupy the same space. But it took somebody like Dustin, who, Jeremy said it beautifully, he's a pastor who is not intimidated by the business concepts that come in. But he's also not intimidated by the ministry side. So he was able to grab me by the scruff of the neck and slap me around a little bit in such a loving way. But to say, Aaron, you've got to reconsider the church now. Like, you can't kick it to the curb in order to have business. You have to do both together and value them.
Yeah, because we end up just doing the opposite. We end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's like, well, it's all ministry and no business. Well, then you go the other way. You just flip the coin. And people are like, well, I'm getting out of the church, 4 walls.
Yeah.
You got to get out of the 4 walls, which is code for I'm done with the church.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which is wrong.
Right.
Because biblically, like, this is the thing. Biblically, the model is this. The fivefold ministry, apostles, prophets, pastors, evangelists, teachers, they do what? They equip the saints
for the works of ministry.
For the work of ministry,
Yeah.
right? It is a both and.
Yes.
Right? So the gift, the fivefold ministry is a gift to the church. Yeah. It's a gift to us,
Yeah.
right? As believers, when we come to church, when we do this. But the gift to the world, the unbelieving world, is saints.
Yeah.
So when we
Equipped
come,
saints.
equipped
Yeah, man.
saints, we are the gift to the world. So just logistically, Aaron's a logistics guy. He's very tactical, right? I love that about him.
Yeah.
I'm less that way, but I'm getting more that way because I'm hanging around him. Most people go to church, you said it, twice a week.
Right.
Right? Sometimes.
Yeah.
Once a week.
If they do a midweek Bible study.
If they do a Wednesday night, right?
Sure.
10 to 12 on Sunday, 7 to 9 on Wednesday.
Yeah.
That's 4 hours. What's the average work week?
So they got over 40.
40.
Yeah.
Probably over 40
Right.
if you're employed. That means you're giving 40 hours to business and 4 to God. If God's not interested in your business, and he's just interested in those 4, you're giving him a tenth of your influence.
That's a tithe of your influence.
You're giving him a tithe of your life,
Exactly, man. Yeah.
right? And, well, that's just logistically. How do you change the world on a tenth of your time?
No, you don't.
And just extrapolate that across the church as a whole in the United States and then the world.
Yeah.
And so you asked a question a couple weeks ago. I love good questions because they get to the heart.
Oh, yeah.
So what does kingdom have to do, or what does business have to do with kingdom? Or how does kingdom impact business? And I think that's one of those areas where you have to look at it just logistically and say, okay, if God is only allowed to move in the 4 hours of my life and he's not interested in my job, then he's getting a tenth of my time, influence, and impact.
Yeah.
But if he's interested in business, if he's interested in who you are after you're empowered by the fivefold ministry, come on, if he is,
Yes.
that's how the world changes.
100%,
Because
man.
people will walk into our businesses that will not walk into our churches.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if they walk into your business as a spirit-filled believer, they can encounter God. Because the Bible says that they laid their sick in the markets,
They did.
not the temple.
No.
Okay, where was Jesus going to be?
Yeah.
And I forgot the percentage of miracles that are done in the marketplace.
Right.
Jesus was not afraid of the marketplace. He actually does miracles there. And people actually expected miracles in the market.
Yeah.
Imagine, right? Imagine our businesses that are run by spirit-filled CEOs, CTOs, CFOs, managers, I don't care what you are, marketing directors, filled with the Spirit of God that come in on Monday and they say, you know what, God, I know you're interested in my Sunday, but I know you're interested in Monday too. Lead me today. Speak to me today. Who am I talking with today? Come with me on this sales call, God.
Yeah.
And we have trouble with that because that wall is there.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, God doesn't touch sales calls.
No.
He doesn't touch RFPs and
not
invoicing.
sanctified, man.
No,
Yeah,
he's not interested in that, right? He's interested in the worship time, 10 a.m. when the music starts.
That's it,
the
man.
guitar goes, right?
Yeah.
He is interested in that. But who you are, an empowered person, if you bring the Holy Spirit into your life, and what I would do to challenge that is, well, he was pretty interested in Peter's fishing business.
He was. No doubt about it, man. He was-
Right?
Yeah.
Jesus comes and is like, how's it going tonight?
Yeah.
They're like, we didn't catch a dang thing.
Try the other side.
Yeah. It's like, throw it on the other side.
Yeah.
And they're exasperated because they're like, Jesus, I've grown up on this water.
Yeah.
I know where the fish are.
Yeah.
We've been at this all night. I'm tired. I smell like these
Yeah.
guys and water and fish. I'm going home to my wife. She says,
Yeah.
throw it on the other side. And Peter's response is, because you said so, I'll do it.
Let down the net. Yeah.
I hate that I'm doing this.
Right.
I hate that I got this text. I
Yeah.
hate that I'm living in this van. I hate that I'm whatever, fill in the blank. I'm obeying right now, but that's the heart of this action that I'm taking is obedience.
Yeah.
And abundance comes. I hate the hustle.
Right.
I hate the hustle. Because if you're hustling, you're working like the old kind.
Exactly.
That's
man.
the old way of work. And sorry, man, I know
No,
I'm
that's
talking
good.
a lot, but
No, that-
Adam, you said it. God told Adam to tend the garden.
Yeah.
Work was a blessing.
Right. Right.
And then sin happens and work becomes
Became
a
a
curse.
toil. Yeah.
He says, you're going to earn this by the sweat of your brow. And people are like, you got to hustle. You got to put in 80 hours. You got to work harder. You got to make more phone calls. You got to, right, hustle.
That's ingrained in American
And
culture.
we're listening to Gary
mindset.
Vee and we're listening to all these guys
Yeah.
that, God bless them.
Yeah.
Right? But they're not kingdom-minded people. And
Right,
you can
right.
cut that if you want to. God
No,
bless
it's good.
you,
No, it
Gary,
needs
right?
to stay.
But as believers, we're listening to the voices like, oh, that's the key. I just got to work harder. It's like, wait a second. You serve a God who blessed work.
Yeah.
And when you obey, your nets break.
That's it. Yeah.
When you send the RFP, when you send the proposal, when you get in the sales meeting,
Right.
something pops. Why? Because I have a God advantage in my life. And that's like, don't go after hustle, go after God.
That's it.
Go
man.
after his inspiration. So kingdom.
Right.
Yeah.
So like in everything you do, seek first the kingdom of God in the invoicing.
You mentioned the language, how it changed and it precedes a culture shift. And so I'm looking at it from a micro level of what happened in the church, and even a more micro level in the American church. So what happened, because I remember when I got out of high school in 1980, 1987,
yeah.
you know, right at the
1770,
post-Stone Ages. I remember my options. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to go where there were hot girls and find something where I could be involved in sports on weekends.
Okay.
And so I remember my mom and dad telling me this: why don't you go to Bible college for one semester to get direction?
Yeah.
And so I remember going there, and I'm like, well, I always knew I was just this square peg that everybody tried to conform to a round hole, and it just wasn't going to work. My dad always told me, even from a young guy, he said, "Deron, you're a maverick." But I wasn't like a James Dean rebel.
Sure.
I wanted to piss people off, and I wanted to do something completely different just so I could stand out. It was just, I legitimately would like, well, don't tell me this is reality, because I see something behind there that says that what you're telling me is a reality is really not. So I'm more interested in that.
Yeah.
I was just always more of a searcher. I wanted to
Sure.
legitimacy. I wanted to legitimize the substance behind all the appearance stuff. I wanted to see that. And so I went to Bible school for a semester. I remember going to the little prayer meetings and people just praying for me. Oh, you're called to this. And I'm like, so if I'm going to be in ministry, I've got to, I would be a pastor of a church.
Yeah.
I've got to be an
Dude,
evangelist
that's
or a
it.
missionary. And if you're a woman, you have to be the wife of one of those three
Yeah, right.
things.
A piano player.
And that's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
ministry. And I just it never registered with me. But during all that time, and then after I got married in my early years, this language was, like you mentioned, the burn in your heart, but the timing was off.
Yeah.
But now hearing this, so I guess I went around the world there on that. But the question is, kind of from your perspective, where did it jump the rails, within the church, where we got away from that and we built our own little subculture mentality instead of seeing the kingdom? And what caused that?
I can speak to that.
Man, I think the answer to that question, that's a great, like I said, those good questions. It didn't happen in our lifetime. It didn't happen to our parents or grandparents. I think this is older than America.
Yeah.
There's a book. Okay, so quick story. And then Aaron's going to take this and wrap it all up perfectly because you're good. That's what you do.
It's like a bow on the top
Yeah,
of
yeah.
a gift. Yeah. Okay.
When I was working with youth in church, I had this kid that was really good at rugby. He was good at this sport, right? And for those of you who don't know what rugby is,
it's aggressive football, right?
it's aggressive football. It's man's football for all you people overseas listening. So he came to me. He was really good at it. He had an opportunity to go to college and get a full ride to do it, right? And he came to me one night. We went to a baseball game. Just felt like God just said, speaking to this kid, 18 years old. And he's sitting in our car, my wife and I, and a couple friends and him, and he's basically opening up. He's like, Jeremy, I don't think I'm going to go to this college. And he starts crying. I'm like, why? He's like, I think I'm supposed to go to Bible college. I said, really? I was like, did God tell you that? He's like, no, I'm just probably feeling it, I was like, why?
Yeah.
Right? And basically what it come down to is he had this wall. What I'm supposed to do with my life is go to Bible college, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not against, I went to Bible college.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not against it if you're called to it.
Right.
But he had this wall of like, what I'm supposed to do as a Christian kid at 18 is do this. And that woke me up. That conversation. And I told that young man, something that I'll never forget. Sometimes you do better when you're talking to somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I said, why do you think God called you to lane 7? He called you to the race. you're thinking he's like, you only run the church lane.
Right.
And we've got this idea in the American church, and that kid had it somehow, right? Of like, what I'm supposed to do is be a pastor.
Yeah.
Because I want to be spiritual.
Right.
Sure.
Right? I'm supposed to serve God, so I should probably go into ministry. I should probably be 3%.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? Not these 97 pagans.
Right. Yes.
Pagans.
God help
Right?
them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I told him, I was like, dude, don't get caught up on the lane. He said, run with perseverance the race set before you. Just be on the track.
Yeah.
And be the best, most spirit-filled rugby player in America.
That's it, man.
And bring the kingdom of God into sports.
Right.
And into the limelight, right? Bring Jesus wherever you go and everything you do,
Yeah,
right?
man. Yeah.
And he's looking at me, he kind of comes alive, right? So he did end up going to that college. Great, good kid.
Oh man.
So the reason I bring that up is that put me on a path. I read a book called Turning Points. I would recommend that to any readers. It's by Mark Null, and it talks about the turning points of the Western church from Jesus to today.
Oh wow. Yeah.
It's incredible. And I really believe where we got this idea was the monastic movement in the Benedict era when spirituality said, I leave society to go to a monastery.
Creating a subculture.
I sell my belongings. I don't talk. I don't have sex. I don't have things.
Yeah.
And I leave society. Why? To serve God. And that looked like spirituality. So society, Christians today, to be spiritual means you don't
Yes.
engage society.
Come out from among
you
them.
Come
Be
out
separate.
from culture. Don't
Yes.
play cards. Don't go to movies.
Right,
don't wear
right,
dresses.
right,
Don't
right.
put on the makeup. Don't play sports. Don't go to college. Don't.
Exactly. It's a remix.
That's right. And any kid that grew up in church knows all the don'ts.
Oh, yeah.
You know what they're struggling with? What do I do?
What do I do? Yeah.
What do I do, God? And I feel like the Father is going, just run.
Yeah, man.
Run with me. Run the race, right? Run the race
So
with
good.
perseverance. That's but what is in front of you, and run in such a way to win.
Yeah.
Right? And everything you do. If you want to be a doctor, be the best spirit-filled doctor that brings kingdom into it.
Oh,
If you
man,
want to be a
yeah.
lawyer, if you want to go in real estate, if you want to be a pastor, if you want to be whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever. And we need that language to change. But I think it started, man, way before you and I were born.
Boy.
And it's in our
it's
DNA
so
that to
good,
be
man.
spiritual means I don't have money.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't have the house, car. I pull away from society and culture to devote my life to God. And that is in us.
Yeah.
That wall has to be smashed.
And isn't that why culture has devolved into what it is today? Because we removed ourselves as
Better
kingdom
believe-
people from it, man. And so this is what we get. This is what we're left with.
And,
Right.
and anytime something, Aaron, you're going, man. Anytime
Tag
something
him in.
happens in that world, unfortunately, as Christians, we go, oh, yep, see? Hollywood, of course, Hollywood's evil.
Yeah.
And it's going to get more evil.
Absolutely.
And we leave it instead of saying, how do we redeem this?
That's it, man.
And
Yeah.
Christ redeemed all of creation back to God.
Yeah.
The cross wasn't just to forgive sins and get us away from a sinful world. The cross was the redemption of creation back to God.
So
and
good.
that's our role as empowered believers. But as long as we have this idea of spiritual means I get away from those evil things
Yeah.
and not redeem it,
Yeah.
we'll never get it back. But if we start training it, the language is changing, man.
That's it.
Yeah.
God's
Yeah.
doing something exciting.
That's been the word that's been burning in me for the last few months is redemption, redeeming it. I mean, and even from a musical standpoint, I've just been overwhelmed with that. I will listen to some of my favorite producers or singers or musicians and have found myself sitting at my computer listening and start just crying for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
And that's,
That's it.
tag.
Have you had your testosterone levels checked?
Yes, I have, yeah. There is that. No,
I'm just kidding. Well, I want to say something for your listeners too. I think is important. I 100% agree. This is why Jeremy needs the mic to be able to drop. What he
Yes.
just shared is 100% true. The enemy has a tactic, and it's been a long-standing
Long game.
tactic, right? More recently, this is the atrocity of, as we're talking about business. The Industrial Revolution played a role in separating us from the kingdom.
Yeah.
And it was business trying to be efficient, and I'm so glad they did. They brought some amazing efficiencies through the Industrial Revolution. But Slater, a man named Slater, he's known as the father of the Industrial Revolution. He came up with this concept of we can have an efficiency in church by creating a parallel church for little kids. We'll call it Sunday school, and we'll separate the parents and the kids so that on Sunday they can be very efficient, and we can have an 8-hour shift that afternoon, right? His heart was a believer. He was trying to solve a problem, but what he did there was to create two things. One is we hire a holy person for Sunday to teach us because we're efficiently working throughout the week.
Yeah.
And it's reiteration of what you talked about the monastic time period. He's not creative. He just continually repackages the same thing over and over and over. The other thing that he did was to separate families. Moms and dads from the kids.
Yeah.
Now, this is what I love about Hope Unlimited Church, Nashville. And some people hate it. It's Sunday and it's hot. And I rented to somebody last week.
This past Sunday was
it was so hot. And you've got little kids, even in air conditioning, they make you hot.
Yeah.
But we're trying to restore that. This is where Pastor Dustin's heart is. He's saying it's all about the family.
Yes.
And even business was about family before the Industrial Revolution. So we have to come back to that. But one of the things I think, I don't want you walking away, for your listeners walking away from this saying, man, the church system has messed us all up. And I want to speak to some of you who feel that way.
Yeah.
The reality is there's a book that's written by an amazing lady, Natalie Runyon. She wrote this book called Raised to Stay. And I would recommend it for anybody to read, especially if you're struggling with this. I'm frustrated with the church system. I'm over that.
Yeah.
She kind of brings into light why you're raised to stay. And I want to make sure that the business leaders that we're talking about these words to, that's waking up people, they are healed of that hurt that happened in church.
Oh, man,
I mean, it happened.
It does.
But there is a healing that comes from it. And on the other side of that healing is 100% of the kingdom operating again through family, mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters. And it's a beautiful vision of what the kingdom looks like moving forward. But you have to get that healing first. You have to get. I had to have my heart healed by a pastor that grabbed me and slapped me around and said, "Come on, let's do this together, right?" And I want your listeners to, if you're burning with that, oh, church hurt me at one time, get that book, read that thing, and get healed. So because on the other side of it, we're taking back the kingdom.
Yeah, man.
Right on.
So good. Wow. As you can tell, this needs to be a series, and it may be. These guys are so chock full of just enlightened, downloadable transformation. I mean, and to hear this, it gives me such relief. Just, so all the frustration and me for those years, it was God. I thought I was losing my mind, man.
Believe it, yeah.
There were times I would sit and think, God, my wife thinks she has married a Fruit Loop. I mean, because Tina she was raised in the same house for all of her life, went off to college. Her dad worked at the same job for all those years. Yeah. And then she married this.
That's amazing.
And
God bless her.
But yeah, God bless her.
She cleaned you up well.
I hope so, man. She's a saint. I certainly married up. But so good to have you, Aaron and Jeremy, man. It's been so rich. Check out those books that they mentioned. And we're in season 5 right now. We're going to have more content like this that's even business related, how business intertwines with healthy identity. And so be sure and tune in next Monday, because we will be here, and we hope you are too. Invite a friend next time on the My Identity Podcast. Thanks. Hey, thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the My Identity Podcast. We're excited that you tuned in and you made an investment of your time into this podcast. It means a lot to us here. I want to encourage you to stop by every week, because we've got new episodes baking in the My Identity kitchen, and they're going to inspire, they're going to encourage you, they're going to give you something to make it through your week. So I want to invite you to click the little subscribe button here on YouTube, and not only on YouTube, but you can also subscribe on whatever podcasting platform you get your podcasts on. You can follow, like, and listen every week. As each new episode comes down the pipe, you're going to love it. And we are honored that you spend the time here with us on the My Identity Podcast. We'll see you soon.